Good afternoon. The time is 12:13, May 21st, 2025. You're at the City Hall, first floor conference room. I am calling the order of the City of Laredo Economic Development Committee meeting. Roll call.
Yes, sir.
Rene Gonzalez,
Here.
Arturo Dominguez,
Here.
Mayra Hernandez, Cesar Garay.
Present.
Omar Minez has been, there's been a new appointment. We're still pending, for this new appointment to take the oath, so we should be expecting to welcome, a new committee member next month. Carol Alexander. Here. Fernando Baldasso,
Here.
Julian Rodnowski. Julian Rodnowski.
You cannot hear.
I see him.
He's present online, Mr. Chairman, for the record.
Mr. Chairman, we have call.
Where's the speaker?
Let the record show that a quorum of the committee members is present, that this meeting is duly called, and that the notice of the meeting was posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meeting Act. I have a motion to approve the minutes. Motion by Mr. Gonzalez. Second.
Second.
By Mr. Garay. Any comments? All those in favor? Aye. Oh, next item, discussion with possible action to create a chapter 380 committee to recommend requirements and initiatives for service provider companies and any other matters incident thereto. We've been dragging this for a while now, but there's a 380 already established, but it seems that it's not tailored to everybody. And we would like to sit down with Director Castillo to put one for our service providers. And I would like to hear some volunteers.
I'm fine. I'll volunteer to be the
A subcommittee.
Yes.
And I don't wanna speak for the chairman, but, and I will, I think some of the committee members would like some more clarification on what this would mean. But in a nutshell, our current guidelines, our current chapter 380 guidelines are heavily based on capital investment and job creation. I would assume that what Mr. Chairman would like to recommend to the subcommittee is to find other venues on how we can amend our guidelines to allow incentives for other companies that are not necessarily heavy on capital investment, but that still represents, an economic impact for the city. And also our chapter 380 guidelines are very targeted to specific industries. There has been conversations already at the city manager level office on how we need to, reprioritize the industries that we need to start incentivizing without neglecting, some of the industries that by nature are good for Laredo. But I will let Mr. Chairman elaborate more in terms of the service provider idea.
What I saw when this thing was brought to the city, it seems that only companies that sell products and yes, of course, they're not from here, they had a chance to invest and they took advantage of it. But it seems that local provider or local people could not invest and did not meet the guidelines because they don't sell anything, they just sell a service. And can you imagine to sell a service that you're gonna have to do, you have to have how many employees?
It's tiered, but a $10 million investment, 30 employees minimum, and the list goes.
Mr. Chairman, what is an example of the service of that? What's the definition of?
Of the 380?
Yeah.
No, the service provider. A service provider was, a broker, a freight forwarder, anybody who sells a service, period. It doesn't have to be a broker, it can be anybody that sells a service they're not in the same category, I think, especially with the avocado people or the Gap and all those people that invested. And again, they have their requirements, and I think they should be kept like that. And we should do a new one for service providers.
And create.
And then again, and hopefully we'll do other 380s to accommodate other industries. I mean, I just think it was too rough. That one for service provider, that was pretty hard to to get there.
And our current guidelines do allow for those type of, projects to be incentivized in terms of, you know, a forwarding agency. If there's a forwarding agency that's looking into establishing in Laredo, that meets the minimum investment requirements and the job creation, they could qualify under our current guidelines. But there are other industries that are not necessarily, you know, in those specific, areas of priority for the city.
So for example, there was a service provider that almost met everything. And I don't wanna say names, but the prior director said, I cannot be flexible with him because then I have to be flexible with the people that already signed the contract. Or they're gonna tell me something, why didn't you do something like that for us? And that's why if it's another category, pues, it's another category, period.
So if we were to create, if as a subcommittee, we create another category, it would need parameters, it would need,
Oh, yeah.
it would still need its own list of criteria.
Oh, yeah, and it should have a whole bunch of them. I mean, people, one was medical insurance, dental and stuff like that. Maybe some type of flexibility, no?
I think a lot of it, and I know this will be a discussion that maybe we will need to have at the subcommittee level, but, a lot of it will have to do with the capital investment that it's being proposed, because remember, our chapter 380 agreements are based on the property value and the increment value on the capital investment that is being done, and then from there a percentage is rebated. Now, if we're talking at the subcommittee level about a project that involves a service provider, that maybe the framework of that project aligns more with other incentive programs that the city already has, then that's where the subcommittee will need to evaluate and compare. You know, we have the NEC, which has similar criteria, but it's for less of an investment, and they can still take advantage of, you know, abatements and fee waivers and whatnot. But I think that's a discussion that will be worth. I know that this item is only for the creation of the subcommittee, but just to give the committee members some context.
Just an idea. Then again, there's investors or developers that do this big warehouse, and they'll do a couple of them, but it's not them that's gonna be asking for that incentive. And so how should we treat that also? So it's interesting, and I think that's a good discussion as well.
Very well. I'd like
Go
to be
ahead.
on
Joe? Anybody else wants to join? And Julian, how many can we be in the committee?
I would say that, we cannot meet quorum,
Four?
so, yes.
We need one more.
I'll volunteer.
Alright, next item, update discussion and possible action regarding the downtown vacant building ordinance for downtown Laredo. And this is an item brought by
That was an item I placed.
Esto, thank you. Go ahead, Julian, floor is yours.
So the question I have for the city is, where are we at on amending that ordinance?
The ordinance, as you all know, and I think we, reported at one of our last meetings, the letters, there was a first round of letters that was sent out to all the vacant buildings, and we can give you a more detailed report. Ms. Amanda Prunella, who's our business development administrator, has been handling this program in conjunction with some of our other members. But yes, initial letters have been sent out. Some of the property owners have already registered. We do anticipate that there may be a second round of letters, to be going out soon. But yes, Amanda, I don't know if you wanna share some of the numbers?
So the first round that we did send, it's 600, it's 600 mail-outs that were to the zone within or the boundaries within the ordinance. We did receive like 50 mail-outs back. It hasn't, as per registration, we've only had like 4 property owners that have been registered with the city, or registered their property as a vacant property.
Mr. Chair. When you say, updated ordinance, Julian, I know that this is a letter that was sent out, but what is your specific, when you're saying update the ordinance? What are some of your examples of what
So-
you're looking to update?
So the motion of this committee was, to remove the teeth that were attached to this ordinance, which is to essentially fine, right now, the way the ordinance is written out, they will fine those property owners for having vacant buildings, even though they're attempting to either sell or lease the property, which is not a form of economic development. So I think this committee voted to remove that whole situation. Same thing with the downtown business improvement district voted that that is not in line with the original intent of this ordinance and that it should be amended. So that's my general question is the city in the process of amending the ordinance?
Well, I believe the ordinance was made to create teeth to get downtown buildings to clean themselves up. I imagine that's what we're trying to do. Is that the case? It was to see if there were vacant buildings, 'cause it's only for vacant buildings, I imagine, right?
It's only for vacant buildings, and the ordinance itself had different, and this is an old ordinance, and that was very transferred to our department, from what I understand in the history of it. When the ordinance was put together, there was involvement from property owners, from stakeholders, city staff, when the ordinance was created, from fees to guidelines to everything. The ordinance was adopted, it was recently executed or implemented. To answer your question, yes, it does tackle the issue of having an inventory and having the property owners tell the city what are their plans. You know, your building is vacant, submit, you know, if it's in the works of being, you know, leased or not. Sharing with us if they have any rehabilitation plans for it or not. If I'm not mistaken, and I think maybe Julian will have more information than I do on this, on historical, that could have been how the NEC program was also adopted as an added, you know, program and incentive to encourage property owners to rehabilitate their buildings.
But-
And this is
So
not,
I was, I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
No.
go ahead,
go ahead,
Julian.
Julian. No, go ahead.
Go ahead, Julian.
So I was a part of the original meetings. That is not correct. The city did not engage the downtown property owners as a whole. I don't think there were probably more than 3 property owners, including myself, in the room when this was being put together. And the intent of this ordinance was to build an inventory, because there was a major question of hiring someone to go out there and build an inventory of the vacant buildings versus figuring out a way to get property owners to come along and self-report. And if they will self-report, there is no fine, because they're the ones spending the time to go and submitting this. What the ordinance has been turned into, I don't understand how that supports economic development when you have individual self-reporting and essentially being fined because they're doing that. Because if they're reporting that they're vacant, they're basically setting themselves up to be fined when they're trying to lease or sell a property. So I don't see how that aligns with any form of economic development.
I think there's different angles that you can look at it, for this ordinance. Yes, there is, and this is not new to, other cities have the same, program and ordinance. The big difference, and I think this could spark even, you know, even more work if the ordinance is to be amended. Take for example El Paso, Corpus Christi, they have a vacant building ordinance, but attached to that, there are programs with grants from the church, grants from the municipal management district, grants from the city to encourage, you know, that, you know, redevelopment. I think this ordinance, what it intends to do is precisely that, you know, tell us what are your plans, because one thing is to register your building as a vacant building, and also understand what are the efforts that are being made to put the buildings up to code, or maybe just facade, you know.
So, Mr. Chairman, what happens, and we saw this with a restaurant, last year, or sometime last year, where you had it, they said it was vacant, they said it met certain codes, and then they had a fire and they found out that it was not a vacant building, it was filled with all this kind of stuff. you're asking, Julian, you're asking that they don't charge a registration for the for the building being vacant, or you're asking if someone, for instance, if the city went in and went to the building and they said it was vacant, and then they go in and find that it's not vacant, that it has materials that can cause, alarm, is that where the fine comes in, or is just for registering, you're being charged a fee?
You have an increasing fine after you register every year that the building's vacant. So let's look at this as an economic development strategy. So you register your building, you say, hey, I'm looking for a tenant, I wanna put a restaurant. I have the capital, I have all these things. I am actively looking for a tenant. If I don't find that tenant on year 2, the fee goes up. If I don't find that tenant on year 3, the fee goes up. And we all know we're in a very recessionary environment today, and the downtown is over 40%. So when we're talking about vacant, it's over 45%, and that was from 3 years ago. That's only increased from there. So what we're really truly talking about is finding a bunch of properties, which I can tell you as a property owner downtown that we have properties for lease. We're not getting anyone calling. So how is it economic development when you have property owners trying to lease properties for pennies on the dollar, and then the city is coming along and saying, register your building, and then we're gonna start feeing you every year you don't lease it? That's not economic development.
I think there needs to be a delineation as well on putting buildings up to code and, you know, from that, it's different than fully having, you know, a vacant building that it's up to code. You know, we see buildings that are dilapidated in downtown, and I think if you as an advisory committee, you can recommend and make recommendations to combine.
Carol is first. Carol, go ahead, Carol.
Well, as a downtown stakeholder, I'm with vacant buildings. I'm interested in this topic. But to Julian's point, it's been years, I don't know, 3, 4 years, that the inventory study was commissioned by the city, and it was completed. And that study it's dense and it's full of helpful information to illustrate the downtown. Would you agree?
We do have, I think, the data
Yes.
for that.
But that study is also full of recommendations. And when does the public engagement component happen where property owners or interested parties are able to sit around a table and talk to people, decision makers, to discuss the contents of that valuable inventory study that's full of different recommendations? When does that happen before the fire?
Really the vacant building and the ordinance per se, those were completed at two different stages. You know, the vacant building ordinance, I think it was conducted or adopted in, what it was, in 2019 maybe, 2020? This study was conducted in 2023. I think these conversations, you know, that's what needs to happen, and not only property owners and city, but also the other entities that are
Interested
Sure.
parties, yeah.
interested parties that also have the ability to put together, like other cities do, like other cities our size do. You know, they combine grants. You know, I think El Paso offers a 50-50 grant reimbursement on rehabilitation projects. Don't quote me on the number, but I do know that they have several programs. The church, the municipal management district, the city itself has, you know, they have several funding mechanisms to even have a solid and established facade improvement program. So to your question, yes. Does that need to happen? Yes. It's the stakeholders, the entities that also have the means to join these efforts. Yeah,
But one, who is gonna run that?
May I respond to that?
Who is gonna run that? Give me a
Yes,
minute,
I'm
Julian,
sorry.
please. Who is responsible for that?
at this moment is this
Who do I
department.
speak to? Okay, so, if it's this department, then
This
the-
department.
what happened was the vacant building, ordinance was created.
Mhm.
And as a response to that, because there was no reliable information of how vacant downtown is. So they commissioned the inventory study.
Mhm.
The inventory study is quite comprehensive and very helpful, and I worked with the parties creating that. and there's a lot of data in there to work with. How can we redevelop our downtown? How can we, it's heavily taxed. How can we start, capitalizing on the opportunity down here? Where's the group that's working towards that, to look at that inventory study and the recommendations, that it's professional recommendations? Who's looked at those? And where, and how many of them have been put in place? And, you know, where do I talk to somebody about, the vacancy rate? It's almost just like the parking. There's a lot of parking fees that come from downtown, but where is the opportunity to go to the parking meeting so that we can discuss parking issues, which is a big number one topic when you're talking about any downtown?
Yes.
When
And I've seen that in other
is
cities
the
as well.
opportunity? Does anybody that's connected to parking, right? We've got retail establishments that have exactly 0 parking spaces, right? That's what we offer. So the parking we depend on is city parking. But where do we get the chance to talk to anybody about city parking? You know, so I mean,
And just to answer real quick that particular question, for the city parking, and as you all know, there's departments for each, and there is a traffic division that takes care of the downtown parking, and they have their open meetings as well. I'm not sure if they're monthly or not, but we'll be more than glad to share those with you as well.
because when I was on the, I was on the terrace, and then I was at the building improvement, everybody has voted to create some kind of parking, at least engagement, but,
Since the
never
traffic
happened.
department has its own advisory committee, I think that if there's concerns or items that need to be discussed in that regard, as a representative of the Economic Development Advisory Committee, a representative from the TERS, a representative, and if there's issues that involve parking, I think that's the venue. But to your point, you know, yeah, this is a conversation where we can start looking at those, you know, different venues.
Go ahead, Julia.
Can I ask a question? So where I'm getting a little confused is, from what I'm hearing from you, is that at these committee meetings, there are decisions that are made, there's conversations that are had, and then the city goes about and, you know, takes those recommendations. This committee has already voted to remove the fines associated with vacant buildings. So the reason this item is on the agenda, because it sounds like what you're asking us to do is to almost re-vote or the question on the table is, this committee has voted on the recommendation of what the city should do. I haven't met a committee member, a property owner, any citizen that thinks this ordinance is a form of economic development. So is the city gonna do anything regarding the fines that they're doing? Because I'm gonna tell you right now, that the theory that finding a vacant property owner, that I can tell you anyone will lease pennies on the dollar in downtown Laredo to a tenant, finding them and calling that economic development is not right, and it's not economic development. You know, the inverse of that is, instead of, you know, and I'm not supporting this, but to our rules item, let's not do chapter, you know, 380s for warehousing. Let's do vacant land fines in warehouse districts so that those people build warehouses. It's that same backwards. It doesn't make sense. The committee has voted, so that's the question, and the reason this item is on the agenda is the city going to remove those or not at this point?
The city will, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I guess the language is that you're using is economic development, but it seems that the vacancy was built on safety issues. Unless I'm mistaken, because it's, and I'll give an example, and that's a question I'd ask you as landowners and building owners. When for business purposes, if I'm gonna wait to do my, do infrastructure changes on my buildings, because I now have a tenant that wants to come in, right? Do you put the building up to code until then, or do you put it up to code for safety purposes now?
So if I may, on the downtown, there are several buildings that are not in compliance. Half of, or many of these buildings are not in compliance. The owners are not even from Laredo. They're not even registered in the city of Laredo. It is very hard to tackle people down, or not tackle people, but to notify them of any obligations that they need to come to bring the building up to code. I think those are so many things that we need to take into consideration also. I don't think that we did, or the city of Laredo is finding these properties. I mean, I feel like the money that's gonna be, it's gonna be going back to the downtown and investing in the downtown area. So it's not a matter of.
It's not, it's going to the general fund, and that's what the ordinance
Wait, the
says.
money's gonna go
No.
into a downtown fund for
No,
downtown
we-
redevelopment?
no.
No,
Not
That's
in that,
not correct.
no, not in that sense, but eventually, I mean, we do wanna we wanna invest in the downtown area. So-
So there's a couple, Julian, you might agree with me that vacant means different things. Just because you have a store full of boxes that have merchandise in them, who would identify that as a vacant building?
it's code enforcement.
Code enforcement.
In the ordinance, it does say that a vacant building is a building, structure, or portion thereof, regardless of its structure condition, that is not occupied, and the word occupied means having a certificate of occupancy.
Okay, so if a building
So this
It's
has
not
nothing to do with
leased.
safety concerns.
for
We need to change the system.
a landlord, a building that's not leased is vacant,
Mhm.
but it doesn't mean it's empty. It doesn't mean it's empty, because you own a building, you
Well,
own a
if
building,
you
you
have
can do what you want,
it's a
right?
certificate,
Well, not
then
necessarily,
it counts
If you don't have a
some
certificate, it's
businesses are
considered
using it
vacant.
as
if you have a
storage,
certificate,
storage,
then
right,
it's
warehouse, and
occupied,
how
and
is
you
that
have to pay the
helping,
fines, right?
you know,
Yeah,
with the
if you don't
revitalization
have
and
Where
attracting.
is the
certificate of
revitalization
occupancy, it is
effort?
considered a vacant property.
I know, well,
What if you have
case
it?
in point,
Then you
you
have to
know,
pay the
with,
fines because
if
it's
we had
stolen.
all the vacant buildings, the 40% or more buildings in downtown that are vacant, used as warehouses, that's not even, I mean, and that's not the case, right, that's not even a conduit to even the revitalization that some entities are trying to bring to downtown.
But also the city of Laredo is a vacant property owner, and I think the department that runs that is community development, right? And what is their stand, what is their mission, what are they doing to rent out properties that are empty?
I wouldn't be able to speak on behalf of other departments, but the city does own, properties in downtown, and there are efforts being made to revitalize Plaza Theater and the courthouse, and to your point, yes, the city does own property, but I wouldn't be able to speak on behalf of the department that handles those properties.
But they won't be fined, but if they were, it's a
I have
great
a
idea
question for
for
the
the
city.
fine to go into a fund that, but who would manage that? Who manages the idea, the dream of downtown revitalization?
I
The
speak-
tiers,
I-
the
hold
tiers,
on,
the
let me
business
speak.
development.
But also,
Yes,
let him speak.
I think what Julian is trying to ask, and this item is about, is how close is the city to removing the fines from vacant, what the city considers vacant buildings, right?
Thank you, Mr.
Are we
Balasa.
being fined?
If that's-
That's the question, how close are
At this
we?
point, the city is not considering
exactly, okay.
removing them. If there needs to be an amendment, that needs to be a conversation with the involved departments, you know, building, city managers, a plan as well.
Okay.
It is a recommendation, and there has been conversations at city managers, level. We will go ahead and follow up and mention the recommendations of the advisory committee, but at this point, you as advisory committee members, it's not necessarily a directive to remove. It's more of a recommendation to reconsider amendments to the
Which is
ordinance.
what we
Right
did.
now, it's
Based
year
on
one.
what? Is there
Right
a-
now,
Year one.
no properties are being fined. Year one is just a registration phase. If there's any amendments moving forward to avoid those fees, those are not in place yet.
So the downtown associations, the tiers, business district, Laredo Main Street, if they went and said, you need to register yourself so you don't get fined, which is basically, that helps the process also.
It does help.
I imagine you want 0 fines.
They get fined even if they register. That's what the ordinance says.
Year two, year one, as the ordinance reads right now, as long as they register for year one and there's no fees associated
So
with it.
why would
Come year
two?
two, if they remain vacant, that's when the fees kick in,
Yeah,
as
but-
the ordinance reads.
But we had voted on that as a recommendation to city.
To prevent year two
Yes.
fees
Well,
to
2,
kick
3,
in.
and 4, yeah. As long as they're registered.
Julian, so you're saying
Yes.
that anybody who owns a property downtown should just do whatever he wants with it? I mean, that's
I'm
basically.
sorry?
I mean, they can do whatever they want with it. They wanna let it fall, let it do whatever.
No,
People
so,
are-
so. to
What's your
answer-
recommendation? In other
That's
words,
an interesting question.
what is your recommendation?
So there's already, so this is what I'd like to point out.
Okay.
So there's been a lot of discussion here, and I'm gonna just highlight certain items that were touched. Mr. Garcia touched on, referencing property owners that are leasing to tenants and possibly fire code, all these issues not being met. This ordinance, this vacant building ordinance, has nothing to do with that. And code actually states that if a building is being used in a certain way, they have to meet certain requirements to get their C of O. So this ordinance has nothing to do with safety. This ordinance has to do with registering buildings, and this ordinance started its discussion because we didn't have these buildings registered at all, to understand the vacancies of the downtown. It was also created simultaneously with the idea that there would be no fines, nothing associated with it until an incentive package was put together. Miriam mentioned other cities. All those cities have incentive packages way greater than the NEZ on top of those ordinances that may include fines. So the best analogy, carrot and the stick. So to answer Arturo's question on, so building owners can do whatever they want. The recommendation that was given to staff and was discussed with the city councilwoman for the district is that as long as property owners are actively either trying to sell their properties because, they're not gonna do anything with it, or if they're actively trying to lease, those were the two simple stipulations. So basically trying to do something with their, oh my God.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Julian.
Yeah, okay, I have to keep my hands down. If at least those two criterias were met, then there would not be a fine. So to your point, Arturo, yeah, if someone's just sitting on a building and going, I'm not gonna do anything with it, and they're
Because
not
it's
trying
mine.
to contribute towards the investment in the area, yeah, maybe a fine seems, amenable to that. Now, if the building is in a dangerous condition, there's red tagging, there's already things that a city can do to deal with those property owners. This ordinance, existing or not, doesn't mean that if someone has a dangerous building, that the city can't do anything. They actually can red tag, they can do a lot of things. So what this ordinance is doing today is disincentivizing people to do anything, let alone register their property. I've already spoken to many properties, they don't even want to register their property. And they're just, all this is doing is building more malice between the relationship between these stakeholders that I can tell you as an individual, I'm sure Bebe can raise her hand, and I'm sure many others, we all want to invest into these buildings, but we either need tenants or we need something to happen in that case. This is not economic development. This ordinance is the furthest thing that I've seen from economic development. That's why it was recommended that it be changed, because it's not even what it was supposed to be.
So let me,
The city seems to have taken this and ran with it and turned it into something to generate revenue, which I don't, at the end of the day, if the ordinance doesn't say those funds have to be used in the downtown, right now those funds go into the general fund.
no, those funds,
And we actually
officially
voted
those
to
funds,
recommend that those,
officially those funds, if they were, again, this is year one where there's no fees being associated, there's no money whatsoever being generated by this ordinance as we speak at the present moment. And just to make it clear, no, those funds are not going directly into downtown officially. Can there be a possibility? Maybe. Is there, conversations and plans that need to be put in place? Yes, maybe. But as it stands right now, I wanna make it very clear that this ordinance is not generating any money. Hence, there's no money going to the general fund at the present moment. Is there a possibility? Yes. My question is, and I hope you take this
it's a
as a
possibility, it's in the ordinance, it says it will go to the general fund.
honest question regarding when this ordinance was presented and adopted years back. Did any of the property owners oppose to it? This went to a public hearing. And I see your point, Julian. You say the city
With
adopted
no
it and ran
public
with it.
outreach. with no public outreach, the majority of property owners did not know this was going. And to make it seem like there was outreach and that there was community engagement before the creating of this ordinance is disingenuous.
I will tell you this, you know, based on what other cities do, you're absolutely right, Julian. Other cities have greater incentives and very strong, guidelines that really help incentivize. But I will say this, those are combined with TERSs, with municipal management districts, with the city's general fund as well, whether it's through parking, you know, fees or any other type of fees. So yeah, that's something that maybe this ordinance is lacking in terms of how do we combine it with programs that are gonna help revitalize. And I will defer a little bit in the sense, when it's mentioned that this ordinance has nothing to do with safety, to a certain extent, I think, and that's what other cities and utilize this ordinance to really have property owners at least have their buildings up to code in terms of safety. You know, buildings that are dilapidated.
If that's the concern of the city, then we should vote as a committee to make this a citywide ordinance, not just the downtown. And I'm guaranteeing that there will be an uproar amongst a lot of citizens if that's the case. Just as much as there's gonna be an uproar amongst property owners in the downtown.
And other cities
If
have
that's
this
truly the
ordinance.
concern of the city, then make it a
In
citywide
other
ordinance.
cities, so then we're talking about a different thing already, you know, with the issue as a citywide. Right now, this ordinance as it stands, it's for the boundaries in downtown. Other cities have it, you know, citywide as well. Yeah, you know, there's different, mechanisms. As of right now, this ordinance and the topic of discussion for this particular agenda item, it's related to just this one, you know, this particular, area.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Has our recommendation been given to council to anyone since we last voted?
There has been
Because I heard you say that you're gonna, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead. No, we
I
don't,
heard
we
you
don't,
say
we
earlier
don't
that
report
you're gonna
the,
take this recommendation and take it
we
to
don't report directly to
don't.
council or take any directives from council. This concern
city
has been
manager.
shared with city manager's office. Conversations have been held. We will go ahead and push this and share the concern. But at this point, I think, Mr. Chairman, we need a solid, you know,
I was gonna hear, Mr. Gonzalez, what he has to say, and then. and then I'll say
Julian, when
something.
you stated that there are individuals that don't wanna register, what is that reason?
They're gonna get fined.
They're gonna get fined, that's the,
That's what I understand.
So-
the city sent a pretty bad letter that was very confusing in how it was written. So there's a lot of confusion also out there based off the letter that was sent out.
So, I agree with there's no need for, and we've already recommended that. Now, if the city manager didn't move on it, that's a that's a conversation with the city manager. That we have no fees, no fines or fees or whatever it's called for registering a building. Or a second year or third year, because you already have the building registered. But my question is more of a safety concern. And why wouldn't anyone wanna register for because if they're not registered because they're hiding something, because you're innocent until proven guilty in any sense. But, that's more concerning for a police and fire issue than anything else. I think we open up a can of worms just on that statement alone, that people don't wanna register because they'll get fined.
Carlos?
Because they will have vacant buildings. They're basically admitting to the city that they have a vacant building.
Well,
I'm not sure.
so
It's not illegal to have a vacant building.
No, it's not, but.
as an investor, you know, he might try to sell a building, and why should I invest more money? I'm trying to sell it. Let the other guy, whatever business he's gonna do, retrofit to his needs. Like if I bring it up to a certain code, then I'm only spending money, and that might even affect me when I wanna sell it, because I'm gonna retrofit it for a store, but he might wanna put a restaurant. So which way do I go? So then you just leave it alone until a potential buyer comes in. Then, you know, you work with the buyer.
But we're talking
That's the
years
plan
now.
that you're asking for, no?
Mhm.
Is
Yeah,
that what
we're
you're asking?
talking
You wanna
years,
know
that's
exactly
exactly
what
what
they
we're
wanna
asking.
do with the property.
the application calls for submitting, you know, their
But we're
plans
talking
for
about years,
promoting
not
it and their
months or-
rehabilitation plans.
No, but
that
you're
are
investor.
in place.
¿Para qué le metes si lo vas a vender?
Entiendo, pero
Go ahead.
Well, so, to Amanda's point, that, some of the owners are out of town, you don't know how to, they're not easily available. But there's a difference between vacancy, which I'm imagining is synonymous with not leased, right? Not leased, not that it's empty, right, but it's not leased. And so it's not generating income for the property owner. And out of compliance, to your point, safety and whatnot, that's already in play, isn't it? If you're out of compliance and your building is in a dangerous situation all across the city, there's an avenue towards being fined, right, for being out of compliance. If your weeds are high and your roof is falling off and it's being inhabited by, if it's a fire issue, that's already in place. So this is
The city
different.
already has that. They don't
So
need
this is
ordinance.
different. This is not about safety and, being in compliance with I don't know if I'm saying that right, being up to code, right, up to code. Code compliance is different than vacant because it's not
It is
leasable.
different.
Yeah.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, so what I'm hearing is, then we should maybe not consider vacant building registry, but really enforce and be on the code enforcement with all these buildings, cause there are fees, right, involved when buildings are not compliant.
Right.
So if that's gonna help, mitigate the problem, the issue that we have with dilapidated buildings, is that what I'm hearing?
But,
Cause
well,
those are two
no,
different things.
No, what my message, my hope is that if the point of the vacant building, ordinance is to get those buildings occupied because it's better for a
And
lot
up
of
to
reasons.
code.
It's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of reasons it's better for our whole city, right? For downtown to be occupied.
Cause the moment you have, they become occupied, that means that the buildings are put up to code. So maybe it should be the other way around. Let's make sure that all the buildings, are put up to code before we even consider, is that what I'm?
No.
No, many of the
Guys,
buildings.
That's how we're
no,
reading
that
Many of the,
doesn't
well,
make
cause
sense.
I'm not finished yet, but
Okay.
many of the buildings that are vacant are up to code, they're fine, you can move right in,
Okay.
right?
Mhm.
Many of them are, so those are two different issues.
Mhm.
But for the vacant building, there are, objectives for the vacant building, ordinance. I don't think safety is, well, maybe it's, there's the broken windows and that kind of, those theories, but if the vacant building ordinance the point is to get downtown occupied, then I'm hoping, what I'm saying, is that the inventory study is looked at thoroughly with a group of people that are connected to that, and that we look at the recommendations and we engage the public connected to that very helpful study with a lot of data.
To identify
recommendations.
amendments for the ordinance.
Yes, so that we could, connected to the ordinance is this inventory study, but who's looked at that?
Julian, I make a motion
Yes.
that you and Carl get together and write something that is a win-win for you and the city that can work and amend this.
No, and go directly to management or your councilman.
And put it in writing, put it in
So
writing, this is what.
it's already been
It's already
sent
there.
in
It's in the
writing.
inventory
That's
study.
why the question,
For the ordinance.
that's why I wanted the very simple question, which is, where is the city at? But what I've heard at this point is our initial recommendation, because the city was provided a document that removed the teeth of the whole thing and kept, the original intent still in there. And since then, the Business Improvement District and our committee has voted to recommend to move forward with those, with that update. But what I'm hearing is what we recommended didn't go to anyone. That's what I just heard.
The city
It did go
manager.
to city manager's office, and we continue to talk to them and work with them to see what are the parties that we need to get involved, if there's a recommendation that needs to be made and,
Move
considered for amendments.
And move forward.
If a recommendation needs to be made, the recommendation was made by us, that's why I'm asking the question. Our recommendation was made,
council.
so what is,
You as an advisory committee made a recommendation to the city departments, we're talking to city managers, and if a recommendation is to be made or recommended to city council, that's something that I can come back and give you an update on that.
Okay.
So where is staff's, that's my question, where is staff's position on our recommendation since that's been provided? Has there been a conversation? Has there been a?
The concern has been shared with city manager's office. At this point, I don't have a solid response for you as to telling you, yes, we're gonna take this to city council and this is the new ordinance and this is, you know, the amendments that we think are gonna work. Because there are some other things that we need to take into account, like Chairman just mentioned, you know, how does this align with, cause we need to have other parties involved if we're gonna make any amendments to this
How does
ordinance.
this align with, well, that's a little, and I'm sorry to sound very frustrated on that, but that's a little frustrating to hear that when this whole draft was done with about a couple of meetings with a couple of stakeholders that then went to complete draft within the city and no stakeholder involved.
Julian, I
So-
wouldn't be able to speak on that because that was way before my time. I don't know how this ordinance was put together, who was involved, who opposed it, who approved it, who supported it. Different city council members have, you know, been in, since then, have been in and out, different administrations, different leadership.
The squeaky wheel, Julian. Gotta keep on pushing.
I know.
But it has to be a win-win. I mean, you cannot just ask for yourself. You have to, how can you complement what they're asking for in such another way, or, you know what I mean? It has to be something fair, that it doesn't, I mean, you're just storing things there and it doesn't meet compliance, fire or whatever, because it's gonna burn up and you're gonna burn up the next.
You know, and let me add something. I know that the recommendation at the meeting that you mentioned, Julian, that you brought up to this committee was to just remove those fees. My recommendation to the committee as the director of the department is, yes, let's sit down and see how we can make this a bigger thing. You know, this is not just about removing fees. Let's sit down, have you, you know, does the Laredo Main Street talk to the church? Is the church talking to the bid? You know, all these different organizations that have a genuine interest in downtown, are we talking to each other? What can every one of us put skin in the game like El Paso does, like Corpus Christi does, to where if there's an ordinance, whether it involves fees or not, what are all the entities that have a vested interest in downtown? What is it that we can do as a group, as a collaborative effort, to put something that's gonna create a win-win for both parties?
Like, I mean, I have nothing to do with downtown, but if you ask me, if they have an inventory, they can say, and they call them to invest, or they want a property downtown, because they can tell them all these are vacant, and these are the people you contact. I mean, that would be part of the city. I mean, they're gonna help you out.
And
as
if
well.
I may add, and this is just purely an
You're right,
objective,
Arturo, that was
this,
the original, no.
and this is an
Arturo's correct in what he
objective,
just said.
and
That
this
was
is,
the original
yeah,
intent.
and this
You're
is an
correct.
objective comment, you know, yes, there's an inventory, and we wanna be able to show buildings that are at least, you know, have a facade that is, you know, enticing, and that it's, you know, that attracts people as well. And I'm not saying that this ordinance is gonna attack that, I'm just saying there's different moving components to get to where we all want to get. Trust me, we also want that. Take into account as well, this department is very forming the divisions and the people that are needed, because that's a complete, you know, program in itself, you know, it's an entire area.
Mr. Chairman.
There's a window of opportunity there,
Mhm.
Julia.
Mr. Chairman, I know you have an open, motion, but since we've already gotten the answer of where it's at city manager's level, do we need a motion?
For an update.
We haven't gotten a second. so, you know,
Or to follow up, or to,
Yeah, point of order, you had a motion to,
yeah.
Have
I-
Julian
I-
and Carol?
I'll table it, but
Oh.
there's a motion to update, to get an update and to follow up with city manager's office. Is that what you want, Julia?
Yes.
So that's the motion to
You
follow
have a
up
second?
with city manager's office as to the fines, and if they're gonna remove them or not, or if there's a way to negotiate those fees.
or we
And
can-
again,
or we
there's
can
no
go to
fees
city council,
involved
yeah,
right
yeah.
now as it stands, as we speak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Gonzalez. Any more discussion?
What was the motion?
The motion was to follow up with the city manager's office and see what is going on with the fines that they requested to remove. That's basically the.
With the
And now it's a
recommendation.
discussion.
with the
No,
recommendation.
we just had the
We just
discussion.
had this discussion.
But then
No,
again,
Did we vote?
Yeah, we have a second,
we
you
have-
need a, you need vote.
Did we
Yeah,
vote?
we approved.
But can we,
For it.
is discussion did you close discussion?
No, there was already a motion, he seconded,
I'm
now we're
saying that
voting.
this is based on discussion that we've had already.
but I asked if there's any more discussion before we vote. That's what I asked. Is there-
Well, you made a motion.
Yes,
The
and I-
motion second, and then there's a
There's
discussion.
discussion.
So,
Now
yeah,
there's
that's why I just
discussion.
said, any more discussion before?
Yes, I have some more
Okay,
discussion,
go ahead.
unless you are opposed to it.
No, no, go ahead, go ahead.
Well, I'm hoping that in that recommendation, or, that we include an opportunity for leadership to discuss the point of the, vacant building.
You wanna
Do you wanna
amend the
make the
motion?
motion?
I'd like to amend the motion, yeah.
I'll accept it.
Okay. That it include a discussion of stakeholders, whoever wants to come, and leadership.
Second, I'll editorialize after this. Second. Motion second. All in favor?
I mean, any more? Now's the time. Call for the vote. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously.
Can I make a additional motion?
Oh my. Go ahead.
Can we have the motion?
Well, I just didn't wanna get it super complicated with amendment after amendment. Just to motion to, request city staff to meet with PERS board members, Business Improvement District board, oh my god. Business Improvement District board members, the Laredo Main Street, all downtown stakeholders.
I mean, just, let's keep the motion how it was. She amended and that's more
No,
than.
it's actually for a new motion.
See, but,
Do you
I
have a
mean,
second?
we have a motion in the floor. We haven't voted.
We voted.
We
We
voted.
voted,
Yeah, but we cannot have two motions on one
On the
item.
same thing,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, yeah, we
on
voted.
the same thing.
so it passed, the previous motion passed,
I'll see it.
okay.
Motion passed. Julian, next time, Julian.
But I think Julie.
For next
Yeah,
item on the
but-
agenda.
But
I
just
think it was
point of
included
clarity, you
in
can't
that.
have two motions on the same agenda item? I've never heard that
On the
before.
same item,
Same item.
we
My
are,
recommendation is that we table the motion that was already, voted on and make an amendment on the motion to have one final motion adding the recommendations of both committee members.
if everybody agrees.
Right.
Yes, yeah, I agree.
Everybody agrees?
Motion to table.
Motion to table, what we voted for.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Julian. What's the motion?
Motion to table, we need votes.
Oh, motion to table?
Aye.
Everybody say yes. Go ahead, Julian. Motion
That
to-
staff meet with the tax increment reinvestment zone, the business improvement district, any, I guess, EDAC committee member and Laredo Main Street. And any other stakeholders that I missed out to discuss the vacant building ordinance and any potential incentives to attach to the package.
Second? He did a
I'll
motion.
I'll
Second by Carl. Discussion? I mean, I wanna say something on this discussion, Julian. If they invite everybody and everybody doesn't go, that's their
That's-
problem.
yeah.
Because I mean, you create these meetings and people don't show up and then they get upset. And, I mean,
Yeah, the city should be.
it's just a comment, it's just a comment, I'm not saying no, and I'm not saying that I'm gonna vote no, but you all better put these people where they're supposed to and make the best recommendations for that, because if not, then people get upset and the other party's not in agreement, it's a mess.
And if I may, we'll be reaching out to these entities. Again, this department is rarely forming and I don't wanna call it a division, but it's rarely forming we're a department of four that serves the entire city. And it's rarely forming the resources that are needed to really attack all the needs in the different areas that have the opportunities for growth. But we, at one point, got together with every single entity in downtown, so allow us to be the liaison in putting this together as an initial, collaborative meeting and conversation, and we will, bring back an update on that.
Any more discussion before we call for vote? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimous.
Motion
Thank
to
you.
adjourn?
Second.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.